Right now, Magyar versus Orban. Hungary's fate is decided. A political thriller live on air. Europe against the Russian world. The finale tightened the noose around Viktor's neck. Something happened that even the Kremlin didn't expect. From victory in 3 days to total collapse, the Kremlin is drowning in its own war. The May 9th parade is being cancelled. Hell on Red Square. The domino effect has begun. The system is cracking and it's impossible to stop it now. Technological shock for the Russian Federation. An old army against the future. Soviet legacy can't withstand the blows of technology. The war has entered a new era. Our people did what puts an end to the Russian army. And this is only the beginning. Nature's revenge for Ukraine. Russia is going underwater right now. People are trapped by the elements. Destruction is growing. Anger too. The catastrophe is turning into a political crisis. The Baltic knot is tightening. Tension is reaching its limit. The Kremlin is resorting to ultimatums. Geopolitical shift. Japan is strengthening Ukraine. Russia is losing influence. The global map is changing before our eyes. All about this next in our Hotspot episode. Day X has arrived. Hungary is hanging by a thread. The country's fate is being decided right now. The election race is turning into a political thriller with a finale on the brink of explosion. Cornered Kremlin ally Viktor Orban is desperately scrambling and ready to make any deal just to stay in power. For him, it's no longer just an election, it's a matter of survival, career, maybe even freedom. The final blow to Orban's positions before the election, Péter Magyar's TISA party is pulling ahead in all key categories. Watch all the fiery details right now. From the Kyiv in 3 days slogan to a nervous breakdown over the most sacred symbol of Putin's system, the May 9th parade. And here it is, a total collapse. Purges are beginning in the Kremlin. The governors of border regions are the first to be hit. But this is just the start, then down the chain of the power vertical. But the main problem isn't the officials at all. The problem is something else. The war the Kremlin called victorious is spreading deeper inside Russia itself. The country is starting to boil from within. Even the pro-war Z voices are cracking and are already openly going against Putin's system.
Large-scale purges have begun in Russia.
Of course, it's a catastrophe.
And this is no longer about fighting the opposition. Their own are in the crosshairs. Those who just yesterday were considered the backbone of Putin's system.
We martyrs go to heaven, and they will just drop dead.
The governors of border regions were hit. The very ones where the war arrived long ago. Not on TV, but in reality. According to the Institute for the Study of War, Muscovy is discussing the replacement of several key figures at once. Governor of the Belgorod region, Vyacheslav Gladkov, head of the Bryansk region, Alexander Bogomas, and the leader of Dagestan, Sergei Melikov.
The Kremlin may be making local officials scapegoats for its own failures to adequately respond to the Ukrainian invasion of the Kursk region in 2024, and the cross-border raids in 2023 and 2024.
Earlier, the governor of the Kursk region was removed in a similar fashion. Now the Kremlin is going further. It's now about a complete power reset in the regions bordering Ukraine. But the problem isn't with the governors. The problem is that the war, intended to be quick and victorious, has returned to Russia with strikes, fear, and a sense of vulnerability.
They go from the bottom up. First, they grab some regional minister or a department head. From there, they move higher, up to the vice governor. From the vice governor, they squeeze out information to imprison governors. From the governors, they squeeze out information to imprison ministers. So all of this is building up for now. Well, it's not just building up anymore. You see, it's being implemented. And when the command is given, well, the purge will take on, I would say, a more noticeable character. It's very large scale right now, extremely large scale. It's just that much of it doesn't reach us because nobody is interested for the most part.
Elections are ahead, and the Kremlin clearly understands. The threat doesn't just come from the front. The real problem is inside the country. Dissatisfaction in the border regions is only growing. People live under shelling with communication outages and constant restrictions.
That's it, damn it. I'm sitting here without power. Shrapnel is falling on me from above. I'm freaking out. I have to set up these generators in an hour. Well, damn it. I was going to sleep.
Against this backdrop, even the propaganda environment is failing. Military bloggers and loyal Kremlin commentators are increasingly criticizing the authorities for inefficiency and failed decisions.
Precisely because Putin is afraid to surround himself with worthy rivals, people who can compete with him, that is why he will lose power. And this will likely happen within the current year.
And the more the screws are tightened, the more Putin's regime loses control.
But if Ukraine has some goal there, and Ukraine's truth is this: we were attacked, we will return our territories. You could say there's a truth there, but for us, the goals of the SMO still haven't been announced. What we want, what we're doing, what it's all for, and what the ultimate goal is. Where the war ends, that is, where we've won, it hasn't been voiced.
Moreover, for the first time in 30 years, the Holy of Holies of Putin's image is under threat. The May 9th parade.
The reason for the parade's cancellation might possibly be the ongoing threat of new advanced missiles, which the enemy may currently have in some considerable quantity, and which, roughly speaking, they could potentially use to strike the parade participants. At the same time, I have similar information from the city of St. Petersburg.
In Moscow, the aerial part has already been cancelled. Rehearsals for ground units are being wound down. And some of the parade participants are being sent back to their deployment points until further notice.
And while drones take several hours to reach Moscow, missiles, both cruise and ballistic, fly much faster. In the case of ballistics, the countdown is just 10 minutes. And can you imagine at the moment the parade is there, eyes right, attention, and a missile alert is announced. And then what? What happens? Well, obviously the broadcast will cut out, But what will be happening on the square and all around it?
I think Putin will bend over backwards to ensure the parade happens in some form.
For Putin, as far as I understand, it's just a truly symbolic thing. So there will be some kind of parade, but how it's shown and presented, once again, Russian propaganda is a completely different matter.
And what just yesterday could be hidden behind the phrase "everything is going according to plan" is today becoming a death sentence for Putin's system. A technological explosion at the front. Ukraine's new drones are breaking the Russian army. The war of algorithms has begun. The Soviet legacy can no longer keep up with technology. Putin's front is bursting at the seams. Graphite bombs and artificial intelligence are changing the rules of the game. Ukraine has switched on future mode, algorithms against the occupiers. The front is entering a zone of technological shock. All the fiery details are coming up in this report. Ukrainian manufacturers have managed to achieve a breakthrough in the field of drones. Ukrainian manufacturers are keeping all data on the new drones secret for now, but in Russia, they've already started complaining that fighting against the AFU has become even harder. Like, for example, the commander of Akhmat Abdi Alaudinov. He's never spoken about the alleged downing of drones with such a sour face.
It must be noted that the situation has changed specifically in terms of drone warfare. The enemy has acquired new types of drones. The other day, the guys shot down several drones in this category. Well, we've already studied them. We looked at them in the lab to see what they are. It seems these drones are of joint production. Ukraine and Germany, Ukraine and France, it turns out. These are modernized drones.
Drones are complicating both the occupiers' logistics and their lives. And here's what Alaudinov is talking about, the Martian drone. Drones operate day and night. They can't be heard until the final seconds of their dive, as seen in the video. They aren't detected by standard sensors and are protected from electronic warfare. Moreover, as the Russians themselves write, the build quality is very high. And there is a theory that drones already have artificial intelligence. Alaudinov assures everyone that he already knows the entire technology of these drones. But our experts do not agree with this.
At the tactical level, there are a number of solutions that allow bypassing Russian electronic warfare, including, for example, frequencies, the use of fiber optic cables, and so on. Abdi Alaudinov himself is actually not really a specialist in radio technical matters. In fact, he is just a talking head for Akhmat, and honestly nothing more than that.
That is exactly why Abdi does not say much about these drones. He simply admits the fact with a sad face. The drones exist and they are dangerous. Moreover, Russian soldiers have started complaining that the armed forces of Ukraine have begun hitting with drones carrying graphite bombs. No, these are not nuclear drones. The trick with such a weapon is that it disables equipment and electronics without physical destruction, without smashing the buildings around.
Therefore, as an element of destruction, even without a high-precision strike on a single object, if this graphite dust settles, on wires or any other elements, then it already negatively affects the transmission level and creates corresponding failures. If we are talking about some air defense system, a surface-to-air missile system, and such a munition falls on it, well, yes, it might not destroy the system, certainly, but given its filling, it can completely cut it off from any communication and even short-circuit internal connections.
Ukraine is progressing in technology, and there is no end in sight to this progressiveness, which is very pleasing. Moreover, as stated by the Ukrainian company General Chereshnya, a large underground factory will be built in Ukraine, which will produce components for drones together with the Croatian company ORQA, which is the largest manufacturer of drones and components in the world. The goal? Complete independence from Chinese components. Yes, while Russia is increasing this dependence, Ukraine is strengthening its own forces. At the moment, Ukraine is increasing the production and modernization of drones. Moreover, it even exports them. Ukrainian drone manufacturing companies are among the top 100 in the world. And it seems that the demilitarization that he wanted so much to do, Putin has failed miserably, just like the capture of Kyiv in 2 to 3 days.
As of the year 2024, Ukraine, without a doubt, is currently the country that truly leads the world in the development and use of various advanced drone systems, both at the tactical level and also at the strategic level for striking the enemy. Therefore, we have something to share with our global partners.
In this aspect,
the war has long since changed, becoming more high-tech, and now the Russian tactic of taking tree lines with meat assaults is failing. Along with this, Russian military bloggers are losing confidence that they can even win at all.
it's no longer NATO training Ukrainian soldiers, but the Ukrainian army. It's a bitter conclusion, but we'll have to accept it for what it is. The Ukrainian army, the Ukrainian military are training NATO on how this very war should be fought. And this is already an open secret. If some time ago we talked about training grounds somewhere in Bavaria or Saxony where Ukrainian soldiers were trained, now it all looks different. NATO soldiers are being trained at those same training grounds. In fact, well, I'll be blunt, but based on what I see and what I feel, I know many won't like it, but I'll say it. It turned out that the Ukrainian army is stronger than the NATO army.
The so-called second army in the world can no longer keep up with the ambitions of the old dictator Putin, and it's time to accept that. Russia is drowning right now. Dagestan and Chechnya are washed away. The government is idle. The elements are out of control. People are crying for help. Anti-Putin riots are brewing. Details of what's happening in our report. Dagestan. Nature's revenge or the total indifference of the Russian authorities?
This is such a disaster, the 21st century.
For over 10 days now, Dagestan and Chechnya have been unable to get rid of the effects of record rainfall since March 28th. And it's not that the government is doing nothing. They just have an ironclad excuse. It's a natural disaster. We're not to blame. But nevertheless, everything is under control as always. But it looks like just another report for Putin.
As of today, the situation in Dagestan remains controlled by all government bodies.
Meanwhile, in the Republic, there's no power, no water, no connection. And poor Russians are forced to help themselves.
Help us get our people out. Our KAMAZ trucks, many of them are getting stuck. They can't get out.
And of course, there are the naive video appeals from residents to the authorities. It turns out that such abnormal rainfall is not even a reason to declare a state of emergency yet. I wonder why.
Including deputies at the Republican level, they said that at this time there is no need to declare a state of emergency, as the situation does not currently require it. Some districts received some assistance for their material damage, for part of the damage. Therefore, we ask that our Novolakski district also be included among those districts where a state of emergency is declared.
So that's what it is. It's about getting some surely financial assistance.
Actually, all sorts of different mechanisms can really kick in there, including, if, for example, the property was insured, then it can definitely be considered a force majeure, and so on and so forth. So that needs to be looked at separately. Why the authorities are afraid to declare a state of emergency or an emergency situation even.
Meanwhile, in the Kremlin itself, there's silence for now. Well, no surprise there. Putin probably hoped to wait it out. But that wasn't to be. The dam at the Hejus reservoir also burst. So to speak, here you go, sign for it. The Kakhovka boomerang. But apparently what surprised the head of Dagestan and the mayor of Makachkala most was the destroyed house, as they came specifically to see it. But what's most interesting is the budget allocation for the region. After all, 3 years ago, the head of Dagestan joyfully announced the news of the largest funding allocation. 12.5 billion rubles. But where did it go? All that money? Certainly not on strengthening and modernizing the city.
Nothing was done. Consequently, if anything was done, it was only on paper. This means, once again, the money ended up in the pockets of officials. And in reality, the region was absolutely unprepared for the critical situation that arose. I mean, absolutely nothing. The storm drains aren't fixed, the dam isn't reinforced, so nothing has been done.
Well, okay, so some residents' houses are destroyed. But critical infrastructure, surely that's a completely different matter. Or maybe not. At the substations that power almost half of Makachkala, it seems no action has been taken either. They could have at least used sandbags to protect it, really.
Everything in today's Russia is done, pardon me, through one place. Well, let's not name it. Everyone knows which one. Through the ass. Because the government is concerned solely with the war and all the money goes to the war, plus a little concerned with restricting the spread of information and shutting down the internet. Those are the two concerns that the government cares about. About the people, we'll say it again, Putin doesn't give a damn about the people at all.
Putin has woken up, or at least he's been pretending to sleep this whole time. The master of the Kremlin has finally turned his attention to Dagestan. And quite seriously, too. He took reports by phone on the situation in the region.
Well, why now is actually quite clear. Because it's been hit for the second time now, right? And there are human casualties. And he just had to say something somewhere, right? And as they say, if this is indeed followed by the resignation of the head of Dagestan, then it's a kind of warming up of public opinion, showing that Putin is here, Putin is vigilant, he's in charge, so to speak. And if you thought he was hiding under a rock in a bunker, well, that's not the case.
Then it's not about nature's revenge for the bloody war unleashed against Ukraine. It's that the system itself is unable to handle even the most basic tasks. Where there should be control and responsibility, there's corruption and indifference.
When the authorities are completely independent of the people, they have no interest in reacting on time, because the government believes that nothing depends on these very people anyway. And only when a problem becomes, well, truly significant from a public relations or PR standpoint, are they finally forced to react to it, even if that reaction is just a half-hearted effort. That's how Putin reacted.
As a result, any heavy rain or flood turns into a catastrophe that could have been prevented. But time and again, the authorities do nothing about it, simply because essentially they don't care. The Kremlin is on the verge of a breakdown. The Baltic states are being targeted with accusations of helping Ukrainian drone operators. The Baltic crisis is heating up. The Russian Federation has begun to speak the language of ultimatums and threats. Asia's rapid pivot. A technological alliance with Ukraine is turning the war around. Tokyo is in the game. Ukraine is gaining a new level of ally. Russia is losing its influence. Japan is going on the offensive. All the details are in the report. Russia has threatened the Baltic states over Ukraine. Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova issued veiled threats to the Baltic states, accusing them of allegedly providing their airspace to Ukraine for strikes on Russian territory. Zakharova noted that the Baltic states had received a corresponding warning.
A corresponding warning was given to these countries. If the regimes of these countries have enough common sense, they will listen. If not, they will have to deal with the response.
According to the Russian side, the Baltic states are allegedly allowing Ukraine to use their airspace for strikes on Russian ports in the Baltic Sea. This refers to drone attacks that, according to Russia, could have flown through the territory of these states. After the first instances of Ukrainian drones entering the territory of the Baltic states, the Russian information space began to spread the version about providing the sky to Ukraine. At the same time, there's no official confirmation of such accusations from the Baltic states themselves.
I think all of this should be interpreted as attempts to pressure these countries so that they stop providing support to Ukraine. At the same time, it's well known that there are no facts showing that Ukraine is actually sending its drones through the Baltic states to attack the Baltic Sea. But it's actually quite difficult for Russia to calmly and simply accept this kind of situation, which in addition to destroying Russian oil exports, also delivers some rather painful and significant blows to the Putin regime itself, to its overall stability, and to the way the regime tries to present and position itself as completely invincible and unshakable in the eyes of both its own people and the world.
Earlier, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov made similar statements, also hinting at a possible response to Europe for allegedly providing airspace to Ukraine for attacks on Russia.
Moscow will, without a doubt, take appropriate and necessary measures if it is confirmed that EU countries are indeed providing their airspace for the purpose of facilitating drone attacks on the territory of Russia. Certainly, we firmly believe that if airspace is being made available or offered for the conduct of hostile and terrorist activities directed against the Russian Federation, this will inevitably compel us to draw the appropriate conclusions and, as a result, take all the necessary and required measures in response.
Amid the intensification of Ukrainian strikes on Russia's military and energy infrastructure, particularly in the Baltic Sea region, Russia is ramping up its rhetoric against NATO member states in the area. In reality, the Russians know perfectly well that Ukrainian drones didn't pass through Lithuania, Latvia, or Estonia. They're simply seizing the moment to intimidate their neighbors.
The Russians are psychologically trying to intimidate the Baltic states into reducing their support for Ukraine, otherwise threatening a direct military invasion. This aligns with numerous reports in the global media, as well as Trump's claims that he wouldn't help NATO countries in the event of a military attack. Well, in fact, all of Russia's accusations are groundless. Everyone knows this perfectly well, there's no evidence, but Russia is once again trying to pressure its neighbors, using the war in Ukraine as an argument.
But that's not all. The Kremlin has panicked over the cooperation between Ukraine and Japan in the field of military drone technology. Maria Zakharova stated that such a partnership harms Russia's security interests.
By aiding Zelensky's neo-Nazi regime, Japan is being drawn deeper into the conflict around Ukraine, thereby causing further damage to relations with Russia, which have seriously degraded through Tokyo's fault.
Recently, the Japanese company TerraDrone Corporation signed a strategic cooperation agreement with the Ukrainian company Amazing Drones, which develops and manufactures interceptor drones. TerraDrone has announced its intention to increase its presence in Ukraine. In Russia, however, the cooperation between Japan and Ukraine was not appreciated.
Given the systematic criminal provocations by Ukraine using UAVs against civilian targets on Russian territory, we view such a step clearly taken with the support of official authorities as openly hostile and damaging to our country's security interests, including the protection of the civilian population. It is obvious that such decisions do not contribute to a speedy resolution of the situation around Ukraine, but only prolong the hostilities. We would also like to remind you that weapons posing a threat to our country and our citizens, as well as the production facilities creating them in Ukraine, are legitimate military targets for the armed forces of the Russian Federation.
Such rhetoric is used by the Kremlin to legitimize strikes on Ukraine's civilian and industrial infrastructure. In reality, Moscow's irritation is caused by the fact that Ukraine's technological superiority, backed by the power of the Japanese defense industry, puts an end to the Kremlin's plans for a quick seizure of territories and forced capitulation.
Ukrainian interceptor drones have unleashed Armageddon on Russian UAVs. More than 33,000 targets have been destroyed. An absolute record. Fedorov is changing the armed forces and the front. Technologies of the future are already working. The enemy is in shock. Russian Shaheds are suffering failure after failure. Our drones fly faster and further. Their strikes are pinpoint accurate. And another innovative technology from Fedorov, a unique Ukrainian trump card that blows the occupiers' minds. The armed forces are tearing the enemy to shreds. What kind of equipment are we talking about in our report?
Shaheds are forbidden to fly. Ukraine is reinforcing its sky defenses against Russian strike drones. In March, the occupiers launched a record number of drones, but the armed forces also set a record.
Monthly infographics on the Shahed 136, Jiran 2, and Gerbera UAVs. March results: a record. A total of 6,462 units, 5,833 shot down, or 90%. 629 reached their target, or 10%. Average number of launches per day is 208 units, up 15%.
The secret to the success of Ukraine's defense forces is interceptor drones. According to Commander-in-Chief Oleksandr Syrsky, the effectiveness of interceptor drone sorties increased by almost 55% this spring.
Since the beginning of spring, our interceptor UAVs have already destroyed more than 2.3 thousand enemy aerial targets. The enemy does not stop attacking. On the contrary, they are increasing production, modernizing drones, and improving their use.
Since Mikhailo Fedorov's appointment as Minister of Defense, Kyiv has significantly advanced in the development and implementation of unmanned systems. Today, the Ukrainian defense industry produces dozens of different types of interceptors. Some, like the Octopus or the UEB one, for example, are powered by artificial intelligence. Others, like the Sting, can be controlled by an operator from hundreds of kilometers away.
An absolute world record. A pilot downed a Shahed with a Sting interceptor at a distance of 500 kilometers using Hornet vision control technology. Roman Hulk from the Bulava unit downed 2 Shaheds that were 500 kilometers away from him.
But it's not just about interceptors. Countering Russian weapons of terror is a comprehensive effort. Anti-aircraft missile systems, helicopters armed with machine guns, and ground-based mobile fire groups remain relevant. In addition, businesses and private companies have joined the defense of Ukrainian skies, as the government allowed them to create their own air defense units.
An experimental government project to involve the private sector in the air defense system is already underway and yielding its first results. One of the companies participating in the project has already prepared its own air defense group. As of today, several enemy drones have already been shot down in the Kharkiv region, specifically a Shahed and a Zala.
The armed forces of Ukraine also remember the best defense tactic: offense. In 1 week, the unmanned systems forces carried out at least 3 successful strikes on Shahed launch sites.
And that's all for now. Watch our next episode for more explosive news.